What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead finds himself under attack by a host determined to make headlines? In just 37 seconds, Denise Welch's opening comment would turn a simple interview into one of the most explosive confrontations in British television history. Gary Oldman arrived at the Loose Women studio that morning with nothing but good intentions. The celebrated actor, known for his incredible range and dedication to his craft, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his latest film project. He smiled warmly as he took his seat on the famous purple sofa, surrounded by the panel of 4 women who seemed ready to chat about movies, acting, and his storied career. But within moments, the atmosphere shifted. Denise Welch, sitting at the far end of the panel, leaned forward with a look that suggested she had something burning to say. Before the other panelists could even finish their warm welcomes, she cut in. "Gary, I have to ask you something that's been bothering me," Denise said, her voice sharp and pointed. "You've played so many dark characters, so many villains. Do you think that says something about who you really are as a person?" The studio fell silent. The other panelists, Kay Adams, Nadia Sawalha, and Jane Moore, exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was not the light-hearted opening anyone had expected. Gary maintained his composure, offering a polite smile. "Well, that's what acting is about, isn't it? Playing characters that are different from yourself. I don't think playing a villain makes someone a bad person any more than playing a doctor makes someone qualified to perform surgery." His answer was measured and reasonable, but Denise wasn't satisfied. She pressed on. "But you seem to enjoy these dark roles. You seek them out. It's almost like you're drawn to the darkness." Gary shifted slightly in his seat, his smile fading just a touch. "I'm drawn to interesting characters. Characters with depth and complexity. That's what any serious actor looks for." Kay Adams, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground, jumped in. "Gary, let's talk about your preparation for roles. You're known for your incredible transformations. How do you—" But Denise interrupted her colleague without hesitation. "I'm not finished. Gary, I read that you once said something quite controversial about Hollywood. Something about how actors are treated. Don't you think that sounds rather entitled coming from someone who's had such a privileged career?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This was becoming painful to watch. Gary's expression changed. The politeness remained, but there was now a firmness to his voice. "I'm not sure what quote you're referring to, Denise, but if we're talking about speaking honestly about an industry I've worked in for decades, I don't think that's entitlement. That's called having an opinion based on experience." Nadia Sawalha tried to intervene. "You know what? Why don't we show a clip from Gary's new film? I think our audience would love to see—" "No, I want to finish this point," Denise insisted, waving her hand dismissively at Nadia. "Gary, you've been divorced multiple times. You've had very public personal struggles. Yet you come on shows like this and present yourself as this serious artist. Don't you think there's a bit of hypocrisy in that?" The other 3 panelists looked absolutely mortified. Jane Moore's mouth literally fell open. This had crossed a line, and everyone knew it except Denise, who sat there looking proud of herself for asking what she clearly thought was a hard-hitting question. Gary took a slow breath. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "My personal life is my personal life. I came here today to talk about my work, not to be ambushed with questions about my past relationships. I think most people understand the difference between someone's private life and their professional accomplishments." "But it all ties together, doesn't it?" Denise shot back. "You can't separate the art from the artist. If you've made mistakes in your personal life, doesn't that affect how we should view your work?" Gary leaned forward slightly. "By that logic, should we stop appreciating the work of anyone who's ever gone through a divorce? Anyone who's ever struggled? Anyone who's ever been human? Because if that's the standard, I think you'll find very few artists left to celebrate." The audience began to murmur in agreement. Several people started clapping. This was not going the way Denise had planned. Kay Adams made another attempt to rescue the interview. Gary, your new film looks absolutely brilliant. Can you tell us about working with the director? But Gary's attention was still on Denise, who wasn't backing down. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking, Denise said, her voice rising. You celebrities come on these shows expecting us to just fawn over you, but somebody needs to ask the real questions. Real questions? Gary repeated, his eyebrows raising. Is that what you call attacking someone's personal life on live television? Real journalism? Jane Moore finally found her voice. Denise, I think maybe we should... No, Jane, let her continue, Gary said, his tone now edged with frustration. Clearly Denise has a lot she wants to say. Let's hear it all. Denise sat up straighter, seemingly energized by the confrontation. Fine. I think you actors live in a bubble. You make millions of pounds. You get praised for playing pretend, and then you complain about how hard your lives are. Meanwhile, ordinary people are struggling to pay their bills, and they're supposed to feel sorry for you because someone wrote a bad review of your film? The studio was electric with tension now. Even the cameramen seemed frozen in place. Gary's response was measured but firm. First of all, I've never asked anyone to feel sorry for me. Second, the assumption that actors don't understand real struggle is incredibly insulting. Many actors come from working-class backgrounds. Many have fought incredibly hard to get where they are. And yes, some are fortunate enough to make a good living. But that doesn't mean they're not allowed to have opinions or feelings, or to discuss the challenges of their profession. Nadia Sawalha nodded vigorously. That's absolutely right, Gary. I think... Oh, come on, Denise scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. You're going to sit there and tell us that being a famous actor is hard? That's laughable. I never said it was harder than anyone else's job, Gary replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. But it is a job, and like any job, it has its challenges. The difference is, most people don't have their personal lives dissected on national television while they're trying to do that job. The audience erupted in applause. Denise looked around, clearly surprised by the crowd's reaction. She had expected them to be on her side, to appreciate her tough questions. Instead, they were firmly backing Gary. Jane Moore tried once more to save the situation. Why don't we take a quick break and come back to talk about... No, I want to address this, Denise said stubbornly. Gary, if you can't handle a few honest questions, maybe you shouldn't come on talk shows. Gary laughed, but there was no humor in it. Honest questions? You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to bait me, bringing up my personal life, making assumptions about my character. That's not honest questioning. That's an ambush. I'm just doing my job, Denise protested. Your job is to interview guests, not to attack them, Gary countered. There's a difference between asking challenging questions and being deliberately provocative for the sake of controversy. Kay Adams looked desperately at the producers off camera. This had gone too far, and everyone knew it except Denise, who seemed determined to keep pushing. So now I'm the villain, Denise said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Poor Gary Oldman, attacked by the mean talk show host. Give me a break. You know what? Gary said, standing up from the sofa. I think we're done here. The other panelists looked panicked. Nadia reached out as if to stop him. Gary, please don't... But Gary had made up his mind. He began removing his microphone, his movements calm and deliberate. I came here in good faith to have a conversation about my work. Instead, I've been subjected to a series of personal attacks disguised as questions. I don't need this, and I certainly don't deserve it. Oh, so you're just going to walk off? Denise said, her voice mocking. Very professional. Gary turned to face her directly. What's unprofessional is ambushing a guest with personal attacks. What's unprofessional is using your platform to try to humiliate someone for entertainment. I've done hundreds of interviews over my career, and I've never walked off a set before. But I've also never been treated with such blatant disrespect. Jane Moore stood up as well, looking genuinely upset. Gary, on behalf of the show, I want to apologize. This wasn't supposed to... It's not your fault, Jane, Gary said, his voice softening as he addressed her. You and the others have been nothing but professional, but I won't sit here and be insulted. Denise crossed her arms defensively. If you think asking tough questions is an insult, then maybe you need thicker skin. Tough questions? Gary repeated incredulously. You asked me if playing villains means I'm a bad person. You brought up my divorces. You suggested I'm hypocritical and entitled. Those aren't tough questions. Those are insults wrapped up in question marks. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was unlike anything they'd ever seen on the show. Nadia Sawalha stood up as well, tears visibly forming in her eyes. Gary, please, we all love your work. We didn't want this to happen. Please stay. Gary looked at her with genuine sympathy. I appreciate that, Nadia. I really do. And I have nothing but respect for you and Jane and Kay. But I can't stay on a panel where I'm being treated like this. So dramatic, Denise muttered under her breath, but her microphone picked it up clearly. Gary heard it and shook his head slowly. You know what's truly sad? You had a chance to have a real conversation with someone who's passionate about their craft. You could have asked about the process of creating a character, about working with different directors, about the evolution of cinema. Instead, you chose to go for cheap shots and personal attacks, and you're calling me dramatic for having the self-respect to walk away from that. Kay Adams was nearly in tears herself. Gary, I am so sorry. This is not what we do. This is not who we are as a show. I know that, Gary said gently. And I hope your viewers know that too. This isn't about the show. This is about one person who decided that creating conflict was more important than having a respectful conversation. Denise finally seemed to realize that this wasn't playing out the way she'd expected. The audience wasn't cheering her boldness. Her fellow panelists weren't backing her up. And Gary wasn't crumbling under her questions. Instead, he was maintaining his dignity while she looked increasingly petty. Look, maybe I came on a bit strong, Denise said, though her tone suggested she didn't really mean it. But you have to admit, celebrities do get special treatment. Special treatment? Gary said, his voice rising slightly for the first time. I've been sitting here for 15 minutes being insulted on live television, and somehow I'm the one getting special treatment? The special treatment would have been being allowed to talk about my actual work instead of having my personal life thrown in my face. Jane Moore stepped between them, literally placing herself as a barrier. Okay, I think we all need to take a breath here. I'm perfectly calm, Gary said, and indeed, despite his obvious frustration, he had remained remarkably composed throughout. I'm simply not willing to participate in whatever this is anymore. He finished removing his microphone and handed it to a producer who had rushed onto the set. Thank you for having me. Or at least, thank you for intending to have me before this turned into something else entirely. Denise, perhaps realizing too late that she'd pushed too far, tried a different tack. Gary, sit back down. Let's start over. Start over? Gary looked at her incredulously. You can't unsay the things you've said, Denise. You can't take back the accusations and the personal attacks. Why would I sit back down so you can continue? Because walking off makes you look bad, Denise said bluntly. Does it? Gary asked. Or does it make me look like someone who has boundaries and self-respect? I'll let the viewers decide. The audience burst into applause again, louder this time. Several people stood up. It was clear which side they were on. Nadia Sawalha was openly crying now. This is awful. This is just awful. Gary walked over to her and gave her a brief, kind hug. It's okay. You did nothing wrong. He did the same with Kay and Jane, showing genuine warmth to the three panelists who had tried to stop the confrontation. He did not acknowledge Denise as he turned to leave. but she couldn't let it go. Running away doesn't solve anything, Gary. He stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. I'm not running away. I'm walking away from a toxic situation. There's a difference. I've spent my entire career working with difficult personalities, navigating complex production challenges, and dealing with all sorts of professional obstacles. But I've also learned that you don't have to subject yourself to unnecessary negativity. You tried to make me look bad today, Denise. But the only person who looks bad here is you. With that, Gary Oldman walked off the Loose Women set. The three remaining professional panelists sat in stunned silence. Denise looked around, finally seeming to understand that she'd massively miscalculated. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every uncomfortable second. Kay Adams, ever the professional, tried to regain control. Well, that was unexpected. We're going to take a break. But before they could cut to commercial, Denise spoke up one more time. He couldn't handle a strong woman asking him real questions. Jane Moore whipped around to face her. Denise, stop. Just stop. That wasn't strong. That was cruel. I was doing my job, Denise protested. Your job is to interview guests, not to drive them off the set, Kay said sharply. That was embarrassing. For you, and for all of us. Nadia wiped her eyes. He was so lovely to the rest of us, even as he was leaving. That tells you everything you need to know about who was in the wrong here. Denise crossed her arms again, defensive to the end. Oh, so now you're all ganging up on me? Nobody's ganging up on you, Jane said tiredly. We're just pointing out that you crossed a line. Multiple lines, actually. The producer's voice came through their earpieces, telling them they were about to cut to break. Kay composed herself and addressed the camera. We'll be right back after this break, and we'll figure out what comes next. As the show cut to commercial, the studio was filled with an uncomfortable silence. The audience sat in their seats, many of them shaking their heads in disbelief. The three panelists who remained professional throughout the ordeal looked exhausted and upset, and Denise Welch sat alone on her end of the purple sofa, finally quiet, perhaps beginning to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. She had come into the interview wanting to make headlines and create a memorable television moment. She had certainly achieved that, but not in the way she'd intended. Gary Oldman, meanwhile, had maintained his dignity throughout the entire confrontation. He had tried to answer questions professionally. He had attempted to redirect the conversation to his work. He had given Denise multiple chances to change course. And when she refused, when she continued to push and prod and insult, he had made the decision that any person with self-respect would make. He walked away. The other panelists had been caught in the middle, trying desperately to salvage the situation, to protect their guest, and to maintain the integrity of their show. But Denise had been determined, bulldozing through every attempt to restore civility. In the end, what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview for a new film had become a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. It had also been a demonstration of grace under pressure. Gary had every right to lose his temper, to raise his voice, to respond to Denise's attacks with attacks of his own. But he hadn't. He had stayed calm, made his points clearly, and removed himself from a situation that had become untenable. The contrast between Gary's measured responses and Denise's aggressive questioning couldn't have been more stark. Where he sought to discuss his work and respond thoughtfully, she sought confrontation. Where he tried to maintain professionalism, she threw accusations. Where he showed respect to the other panelists, she dismissed and interrupted them. It was a television moment that nobody present would forget, for all the wrong reasons from Denise's perspective and all the right reasons from Gary's. He had come to talk about art and left having given an impromptu lesson in dignity and boundaries. The purple sofa had seen many interviews over the years, some light and fluffy, some more serious, but it had never seen anything quite like this. A respected actor, pushed too far by questions that had nothing to do with why he was there, making the decision to value his own dignity over the obligation to sit and endure. And 3 panelists, good people who had been professional throughout, left to pick up the pieces of an interview that had gone catastrophically wrong because one person had decided that creating drama was more important than creating dialogue.